If you still believe that working hard is enough to get rich, you're going to be disappointed. 95% of people who study personal finance still die without ever achieving financial freedom. And it's not because they didn't try. It's because they never learned this. The 12 core principles every millionaire knows and lives by. And if you ignore even one of them, you'll keep working for someone else's dream. Let's get straight into the first one. Have you ever looked around and wondered why some people, without rich parents, elite degrees, or secret shortcuts, still manage to build real, lasting wealth, while others, just as smart and hardworking, spend decades grinding only to retire tired and broke? I used to ask myself that exact question over and over until one day I found the real reason. But it wasn't in a bank account, a business strategy, or even a book. It was in a man's voice. A voice that once said, "Real financial education doesn't start in your wallet, it starts in your eyes." Think about that. Not your income, not your budget, your eyes. The way you look at time, money, risk, people, yourself. Most of us go through life financially blind, reacting to bills, chasing paychecks, hoping something changes. But something does change when you change the way you see. I know this because I lived it. And in this video, I want to give you what was once given to me. A new way of seeing the world. A new way of seeing wealth. It's not complicated, but once you see it, you can't unsee it. And that's exactly where it starts to get uncomfortable and powerful. We're not going to talk about tips and tricks. This isn't about cutting lattes or making a vision board. This is about the 12 eyes, 12 mental lenses that, once opened, will change how you think about work, freedom, relationships, and legacy. Most people never open even one. But once you've seen through all 12, you stop chasing money, and money starts chasing you. I'll explain exactly what those eyes are. But first, there's one person you need to meet. A man who changed everything for me, and never even knew it. Jim Rohn, the mentor who saw beyond. He wasn't flashy. He didn't drive sports cars or flash wads of cash. In fact, Jim Rohn started with nothing, just a farm boy from Idaho with dirt under his nails and no roadmap to success. But what he had was a hunger, not for money, but for clarity, for answers. And that hunger led him to a mentor who didn't just teach him how to make money. He taught him how to become the kind of man that money follows. Jim spent decades refining what he learned and passing it forward. He believed that wealth is not something you chase, it's something you attract by the person you become. Not everyone understood him at first, because most people are looking for hacks, shortcuts, or secret formulas. Jim never offered that. What he offered was a mirror. He said, "Work harder on yourself than you do on your job." At first it sounds like a nice quote, but when you really let that sink in, it changes everything. Because if you don't change, your financial situation won't either. No raise, no investment, no promotion can fix what your mindset keeps breaking. And this mindset isn't just a philosophy from the past. It echoes in the playbooks of people shaping the present. Naval Ravikant once said, "You're not going to get rich renting out your time. You must own equity, a piece of a business, to gain financial freedom." Different voice, same principle. Like Jim, Naval isn't talking about chasing money. He's talking about building the kind of foundation that attracts it. These men didn't speak in trends. They spoke in truths that outlast generations. But there's something almost no one noticed about Jim's teachings, something that connects everything he ever said. Jim never listed 12 eyes in any book or seminar. That term, it's mine. It's how I decoded what he actually meant in everything he taught. Because if you look closer, you'll notice that behind every lesson, every story, he was pointing to something deeper. Not advice, a lens, a way of seeing. He wasn't teaching tips. He was handing you a pair of glasses and saying, "Put these on, and the world will never look the same again." But here's the part that hits hardest. Most people never put them on. They hear his words, they nod, they agree, but they keep seeing with the same old eyes. Why? That's what we're about to unpack. The silent error, Financial blindness disguised as effort. Most people are not broke because they're lazy. They're broke because they were taught to see the world through the wrong lens. The system, school, media, even family, told them that effort alone would lead to success. But it left out something critical: the context. Working hard inside a broken model doesn't lead to freedom. It leads to fatigue. And the model you inherited wasn't built for your freedom. It was built for your compliance. You've probably felt it, the sense that no matter how much you try, it's never enough. That maybe you're just not lucky, or not gifted, or not ruthless enough. But that's not the problem. The real issue is that you've been looking at money through the lens of survival, not structure. The wealthy, not always by effort, but by education, see differently. They don't measure progress by hours worked. They measure by assets owned, systems leveraged, ideas deployed. They were trained to play the game. You were trained to follow the rules. But the game and the rules are not the same. It's like being on a treadmill and calling it a journey. You're sweating, burning energy, staying committed, but you're not moving. That's not a lack of effort. That's blindness. The blindness of someone who never realized the floor under their feet isn't going anywhere. And the longer you stay there, the more natural it feels. You stop asking whether the system is broken and start wondering if you are. Jim Rohn didn't scream this from the stage. He hinted at it, softly, wisely. But behind every word was this truth: if you don't question the lens you were given, you'll live your whole life perfecting a path that was never meant to lead anywhere. But there's one thing the wealthy do that almost no one notices, and once you see it, the entire map changes. I'll show you in the next chapter. 4. The core concept, the 12 Eyes of financial education. Jim never handed out formulas. He handed out frameworks, invisible ones. The deeper you listened, the more you realized he wasn't just talking about money. He was talking about perspective, about how the way you see determines the way you move. And once you see with clarity, you start behaving differently without even forcing it. That's when I began to notice something. Every one of his lessons pointed to a different kind of lens, a mental shift, a new way of interpreting reality. I started calling them the 12 Eyes. Now, don't get confused. This isn't about theory. These eyes are not motivational fluff. They are practical, precise, and painfully revealing. Each one exposes a blind spot that has probably been costing you time, money, and peace without you realizing. And here's what makes them so powerful. Once you open one, it changes how you process decisions, how you see risk, how you evaluate relationships, how you spend, earn, and respond to fear. Most people go their entire lives never opening even one of these eyes, and they wonder why they stay stuck. The 12 Eyes are not in your face, they're in your mind, and each one is a filter through which you interpret the world. When your eyes are closed, life feels random. You blame the market, your job, your circumstances. But when these eyes open, patterns start to appear. You start to see the system behind your suffering. You notice the habits that drain you. You recognize the games people are playing and the ones you're trapped in. But there's a catch. Opening these eyes comes with a cost most people avoid at all costs. I'll explain what it is in a minute. For now, just know this. The 12 Eyes are grouped in layers. The first 3 are about awakening. The next set is about movement. Then comes mastery. And finally, legacy. Each layer builds on the last. Miss one, and the whole structure wobbles. But open all 12, and nothing in your financial life will ever look the same. Let's start with the first layer, the foundation. Vision, value, time. 5 Eyes 1 to 3. Vision, value, and time. The first layer is the hardest to open, not because it's complicated, but because it forces you to confront where you've been blind the longest. Let's start with the eye of vision. Most people only see what's in front of them. The next bill, the next paycheck, the next emergency. But wealth doesn't live in the present. It lives in your ability to project forward. Jim used to say, "We all suffer one of two pains, the pain of discipline or the pain of regret." Vision is what allows you to choose the first. It helps you resist the temporary for the sake of the permanent. Without it, you spend your money on moments. With it, you build your life on meaning. Then comes the I of value. This one hurts because it reveals a brutal truth. Most people are not underpaid because they're not trying. They're underpaid because they're not yet valuable. Jim taught that money flows to value, not effort. And the market doesn't reward you for how tired you are. It rewards you for how useful you are. That means developing rare skills, solving painful problems, becoming someone who makes things better wherever they go. Not because it's flashy, but because it's needed. Value is created by design, not by default. And if you don't define it for yourself, the world will define your ceiling for you. Quick pause here. Of the 3 I's we're exploring in this chapter, which one do you feel is still closed in your life? Not what sounds good, but what stings a little. Think about it. Feel it. Hold it for a second. And when this is over, I want you to tell me which one made you stop, because that's the one that holds your key. Now, the eye of time. The one resource everyone gets equally, and almost everyone wastes. Poor people treat time like it's endless. The wealthy treat it like gold. Not because they're smarter, but because they learn the cost of lost minutes. If your days are filled with distractions, your future will be filled with disappointment. Jim was clear. Time is more valuable than money. You can get more money, but you cannot get more time. When I heard that, I looked at my calendar, not my bank account, and realized that's where my poverty started. But here's what ties all 3 of these I's together. Vision gives you direction, value gives you leverage, and time gives you the window to build. Miss one, and the whole thing collapses. Most people live in reaction, surviving days they never designed. But once these 3 I's open, you stop asking, how much do I earn? And start asking, what am I building? That question alone changes everything, but not as much as what we're about to unlock next. Because money doesn't move just because you want it to. It moves when you understand how it flows. Let's talk about that. But here's what ties all 3 of these I's together. Vision gives you direction, value gives you leverage, and time gives you the window to build. Miss one, and the whole thing collapses. Most people live in reaction, surviving days they never designed. But once these 3 I's open, you stop asking, how much do I earn? And start asking, what am I building? That question alone changes everything, but not as much as what we're about to unlock next. Because money doesn't move just because you want it to. It moves when you understand how it flows. Let's talk about that. 6. I's 4 to 6. Money flow, leverage, and emotions. The next layer isn't about what you earn. It's about what you allow to move. Let's start with the I of money flow. Most people see money as something static. It comes in, it goes out, and that's that. But Jim used to say, the rich have their money working for them. The poor work for money. That's not just a quote, it's a diagnosis. If your money enters your life and vanishes by the end of the month, you're not managing income. You're managing exhaustion. The I of flow helps you stop thinking in terms of income and start thinking in terms of circulation. You begin to track, direct, and reallocate money like a river, flowing through systems, not evaporating in chaos. But flow without structure becomes noise, and that's where leverage comes in. The I of leverage shifts everything. It's the I most people never open, because it threatens their illusion of control. Most try to do everything alone. They believe effort equals integrity. But Jim was clear. Success is not a solo game. Leverage is not about laziness. It's about multiplying your output through tools, systems, people, and ideas. Imagine pushing a car with your own hands. It moves slowly, painfully. Now imagine building an engine. That's leverage. It's not about doing more, it's about getting more done through smarter mechanisms. But there's a catch most people overlook. Leverage doesn't just require tools, it requires trust. And we'll get to that uncomfortable truth soon. Now the I of emotions, perhaps the most underestimated of all. Money decisions are never just logical. They are soaked in emotion, fear, guilt, shame, pride. You say yes to dinners you can't afford to avoid judgment. You delay investing because you fear looking foolish. You stay quiet in negotiations because you don't feel worthy. Jim used to say, "The walls we build to protect ourselves often become the prisons that trap us." Emotional traps don't just steal joy, they steal decades. This eye doesn't ask you to suppress emotion. It asks you to see it, name it, and master it before it decides for you. But there's one emotion that sabotages more wealth than fear or guilt combined, and it disguises itself as being realistic. We'll confront that in the next chapter. These three I's, flow, leverage, emotions, form the mechanics of momentum. Without them, you stay in motion, but never make progress. But once they open, you begin to move not just faster, but smarter, freer, and with intention. The next layer? That's where things get deeper, because now we're stepping into the eyes that shape your relationship with uncertainty, discipline, and connection. And everything changes from here. 7. Eyes 7 to 9. Risk, discipline, and relationships. This next layer isn't mechanical, it's personal. It's where strategy meets character. We begin with the eye of risk. Jim once said, "If you're not willing to risk the unusual, you'll have to settle for the ordinary." That line haunted me for months, because I realized I had spent years mistaking comfort for security. Most people do. They avoid risk not because it's dangerous, but because it's unpredictable. But here's the paradox. The longer you avoid discomfort, the more expensive your comfort becomes. The eye of risk teaches you that the danger isn't in failing. It's in never moving. It's in waiting for certainty that never arrives. But there's one form of risk that's almost invisible, and it's the most devastating. We'll expose that soon. Now the eye of discipline. This is not the glamorous kind, not the wake up at 5 a.m. and drink green juice kind. This is the quiet, repetitive, often boring kind that builds empires brick by brick. Jim used to call discipline the bridge between goals and achievement. Most never cross it. Why? Because discipline doesn't give immediate feedback. It's slow, it's silent. It doesn't reward you in days, it rewards you in decades. But without it, you live at the mercy of mood. And moods don't build freedom. Systems do. Daily consistency isn't sexy, but it's undefeated. Still, there's something deeper about discipline that most people never connect with. And it's not about willpower. We'll go there in a minute. Then comes the eye of relationships, not the romantic kind, but the strategic, energetic, identity-defining kind. Jim believed your income would rarely exceed the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. That's not just about wealth. It's about worldview. Your beliefs are shaped by proximity. You start to see your limitations not as personal flaws, but as echoes of your environment. If everyone around you settles, doubts, or complains, you will too. The eye of relationships forces you to audit your circle, not with judgment, but with awareness. Who challenges you to grow? Who drains you? Who reflects your future? But there's a subtle trap in this eye, one that disguises isolation as independence, and it's costlier than you think. Let's look at that next. Together, these 3 eyes rewire your foundation. Risk becomes movement, discipline becomes clarity, relationships become leverage. Miss any one of them, and your efforts collapse under the weight of old patterns. But when these eyes open, you stop reacting and start redesigning. Now we step into the final layer, the eyes that define legacy, ownership, truth. And this is where everything either hardens or transforms. 8. Eyes 10 to 12. Legacy, ownership, and truth. The final layer of these 12 eyes doesn't deal with tactics, it deals with permanence. This is where wealth shifts from being about personal gain to becoming about impact. The eye of legacy is not just about inheritance or family. It's about the long shadow your decisions cast. Jim used to ask, "What will they say about you when you're gone?" It's a question most avoid, because it forces us to acknowledge that survival isn't enough. Legacy isn't built when you start making money. It's built when you start making meaning. When you think beyond the weekend. When your work begins to echo through people and places you may never see. But there's a discomfort buried in that question, and most people run from it before they ever confront it. Then comes the eye of ownership. This one hurts, but it heals. Jim said, "You cannot change the circumstances, the seasons, or the wind, but you can change yourself." Ownership begins where blame ends. It's the moment you stop looking for rescue. You stop blaming your parents, the economy, your boss, your past. You say, "This is mine, all of it, my results, my habits, my story." It's a violent shift, because victimhood feels comfortable, familiar. But ownership? It's uncomfortable. It demands daily responsibility. It doesn't let you off the hook, but it gives you power. Quiet, unstoppable power. Still, there's one illusion that kills ownership faster than anything, and it's a phrase you've probably told yourself for years. We'll confront it next. Finally, the eye of truth. This is the hardest to open, not because it's hidden, but because it stares you in the face every day. The eye of truth forces you to look at what is, not what you wish was true. It calls out the excuses you've renamed as reasons. It exposes the scripts you inherited and never questioned. I'm not good with money. It's just not the right time. I don't have the energy. Truth doesn't care how long you've believed the lie. It only asks, are you ready to stop hiding? Jim said, honesty is the beginning of transformation. But most people confuse self-judgment with self-honesty. This eye isn't here to shame you. It's here to free you. Because once you tell yourself the truth, you can finally act on it. But there's one last shift that ties all 12 eyes together. And it's the moment that separates insight from transformation. Let's end with that. The final shift. The moment that changes everything. Now that your eyes are open, the question isn't whether you've learned something. The real question is, will you look away? That's the silent fork most people reach without noticing. You've seen what most never slow down long enough to notice. You've seen that wealth isn't a number, it's a lens. It's not the dollars in your account, it's the depth of your awareness. It's not just about accumulating more, it's about becoming more. Someone whose clarity cuts through noise, whose vision pierces distraction, whose values guide decisions when the world pulls in every direction. Jim used to say, don't wish it were easier, wish you were better. And most people mishear that. They think it means to suffer more, to grind harder. But it doesn't. It means to elevate your perception, to think differently, not just act differently. Because once your perception sharpens, you don't need to force change. You see where to go. You stop begging for permission. You stop chasing validation. You stop negotiating with mediocrity. You begin to build quietly, steadily, intentionally. But here's the trap. After this video ends, the world will try to close your eyes again. The scroll, the noise, the pressure to fit back into who you were before this clarity arrived. That's why most people forget. But you don't have to. The 12 eyes aren't magic. They're mirrors. And once you've seen through them, you can't pretend you didn't. So here's what you do. Don't just feel inspired. Feel responsible. Choose 3 eyes that hit you the hardest. Write them down. Study them. Build one habit for each. One shift. One choice. One conversation you've been avoiding. That's how you move from knowing to becoming. From insight to architecture. And the next time you feel lost, broke, behind, come back here. Rewatch. Reconnect. Because clarity, once found, must be fed. Most men walk through life blind, but not you. You've seen what Jim saw. You've touched a layer of truth most never reach. And that means one thing. You're no longer chasing money. You're choosing direction. Now build, quietly, boldly, without applause. And when someone asks what changed, don't explain. Just say, I opened my eyes. Practical application. How to use the 12 eyes starting today. Awareness without action becomes weight. And now that you've seen more, you can't afford to carry that weight without movement. So how do you apply what you've learned? It's not about turning your life upside down overnight. It's about making invisible shifts visible, deliberately. Imagine John, 34 years old, 2 kids. He's not irresponsible. He shows up to work, pays his bills, takes care of his family. But his money disappears by the 25th of every month. Not because he's reckless, but because he never opened the eye of flow. Once he did, everything changed. He started tracking his income streams, canceling passive leaks and building a small reinvestment habit. Nothing flashy, just precision. Within 6 months, he wasn't just earning more, he was keeping more. Or take Clara. She's a designer with talent, but she kept underpricing her services, afraid she wasn't worth more. When she opened the eye of value, she realized the market didn't need her humility. It needed her clarity. She restructured her offer, doubled her rates, and focused on delivering outcomes, not just hours. The clients didn't run, they respected her more. Because value isn't volume, it's transformation. And then there's Luis, 46. He's been waiting for the right time to invest in a course, a business idea, a shift he's been thinking about for 5 years. But after opening the eye of ownership, he wrote a single sentence: "No one's coming to save me." That shift, not emotional, but structural, gave him what no paycheck ever had: momentum. He started small, launched a side project, failed, adjusted, improved. Now he's building equity, not just income. But there's one step that matters more than all the rest, and almost no one takes it. It's what I call the anchor. You need to create one space in your daily routine, just 10 minutes, where you come back to clarity, where you reflect, review, reconnect with the version of you that saw. Otherwise, the eyes start closing again, slowly, silently, until you're back in reaction mode, forgetting you ever saw differently. That 10-minute anchor can be journaling, silence, reading, gym, watching this again. What matters isn't the format, it's the return to vision. If you've made it this far, you're not just consuming content, you're rebuilding lenses. That's rare, that's powerful. Most people are still chasing tips. You've seen through the structure. Now build your own. And if this video gave you something real, something heavy, something hopeful, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone whose eyes are still closed. Because once you open yours, you begin to notice how many are still walking blind. But not you. You see now, and that changes everything. Closing reflection. You've seen enough. Now decide. This isn't just the end of a video. It's the end of one way of seeing, and the beginning of another. By now you've been handed 12 lenses. Not rules, not tricks. Lenses. Ways of interpreting everything you thought you understood about time, value, fear, income, people, and possibility. But here's the truth. Insight isn't what changes you. Decision is. The decision to live as someone who sees, someone who no longer pretends not to notice. Most people will forget what they saw here. Not because it wasn't real, but because they didn't anchor it in action. Don't let that be you. Choose one line that stuck with you. Just one. Repeat it tomorrow when the old patterns try to pull you back. And if nothing else, remember this. You don't need to be perfect. You need to be awake. Awake to the lies, awake to the patterns, awake to the moment right now that most people are sleeping through. Jim didn't make people rich. He made them ready. Ready to think. Ready to build. Ready to become. That's what this was about. You've been given that readiness now. You've been given a frame, a philosophy, a blueprint. Not to worship, but to use. Quietly. Practically. Every day. And if something inside you shifted today, even slightly, don't just let it sit. Comment below. Which of the 12 eyes hit you hardest? And if someone in your life is still stumbling through the dark, share this before they get too used to the blindness. You've opened your eyes. Now it's time to open your life. Start with today. Build what only you can build. The rest will follow.